Mickey van de Ven reveals he rejected Arne Slot but eulogizes two Liverpool stars as Premier League's elite. In football, careers often hinge on moments that feel chaotic at the time but defining in retrospect. A phone ringing on deadline day, two managers calling within minutes of each other, a young defender trying to decide not just where he will play next season, but what version of himself he might become. For Mickey van de Ven, one such moment arrived on the most frantic day of his young career, deadline day in 2021, when he was forced to choose between staying in the Netherlands under a coach who desperately wanted him or stepping into the unknown of the Bundesliga. One of the voices on the other end of the phone belonged to Arne Slot. Today, Slot is Liverpool's head coach, the man tasked with leading the post-Klopp era at Anfield. Back then, he was an ambitious Dutch manager building something at Feyenoord, already earning a reputation for progressive football, tactical intelligence, and an eye for defensive talent. Van de Ven said no. 4 years later, speaking openly about that decision, the Tottenham Hotspur defender has reflected on turning down Slot while simultaneously offering glowing praise for two Liverpool players, including Virgil van Dijk, and naming Alexander Isak as the toughest opponent he has faced in the Premier League. It is a story that intertwines missed connections, elite admiration, and the thin margins that define modern football careers. From Volendam to chaos, the deadline day that changed everything. Before he was sprinting back towards his own goal at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium or locking horns with the Premier League's most feared attackers, Mickey van de Ven was still learning his trade at FC Volendam. Tall, quick, and raw, Van de Ven stood out immediately, not just for his athleticism, but for the composure he showed in possession and his willingness to step into midfield with the ball. Those qualities did not go unnoticed. Arne Slot, then building his reputation in Dutch football, was among the first high-profile coaches to take a serious interest. At that point of deadline day, it was the most chaotic day I've ever had in my life, Van de Ven recalled during an appearance on the overlap. The phone would not stop ringing. Van Bommel, he was at Wolfsburg, he called me. Slot, he was at Feyenoord. Two different futures, two different leagues, two different footballing philosophies. Former Manchester United and England defender Gary Neville, listening closely, couldn't hide his surprise. "So you turned down Arne Slot?" Van de Ven's reply was short and honest. "Yeah." Why did Van de Ven say no to Arne Slot? The decision shocked many when it first emerged, and it continues to fascinate now that Slot is managing Liverpool. But for Van de Ven, context matters. Back in February, the 24-year-old had already explained that Slot's admiration for him went back even further. Slot wanted to sign me for AZ Alkmaar when he saw me play in my first season at Volendam, Van de Ven revealed. But the club refused to sell me, and I had to accept that they would not let me go. By the time Slot arrived at Feyenoord and renewed his pursuit, Van de Ven's path was already shaping elsewhere. When he was at Feyenoord, he tried to sign me again, he said, but by then I had already signed for Wolfsburg in Germany. The Bundesliga offered something Feyenoord could not at that stage, a leap into one of Europe's top leagues, a testing ground for defenders, and the chance to prove himself against faster, stronger, more tactically demanding opposition. In hindsight, it proved a pivotal decision. The Bundesliga education that built a Premier League defender. At Wolfsburg, Van de Ven's game evolved rapidly. He learned how to defend large spaces. He learned how to recover against elite counterattacks. He learned how to read danger before it developed. Most importantly, he learned how to use his greatest asset, pace, intelligently rather than instinctively. By the time Tottenham came calling in 2023, Van de Ven was no longer a promising defender, he was a complete one. Spurs invested heavily, believing they were signing not just a center-back, but a defensive cornerstone for years to come. They were right. Tottenham transformation, from new arrival to defensive leader. Since arriving in North London, Van de Ven has steadily established himself as one of the Premier League's most effective defenders. He has already made 73 appearances for Tottenham, forming key partnerships across Ange Postecoglou's evolving backline. His role has not been limited to centre-back duties either. At times, he's been deployed at left-back, trusted to handle wide spaces while still contributing to build-up play. This versatility has sharpened his football intelligence and placed him directly alongside one of his idols on the international stage. Playing next to Virgil van Dijk, you can trust him. For the Netherlands, Van de Ven has often found himself positioned on the left side of defense with Virgil van Dijk operating at left center-back. It's a symbolic partnership. Van Dijk is not just Liverpool's captain, he's widely regarded as one of the greatest defenders of his generation. Van de Ven doesn't hesitate in describing what it's like to play next to him. Our relationship is good. I speak with him on the pitch a lot, and off the pitch I also speak with him. I think everybody can see he's an unbelievable defender. There's reverence in his words, but also clarity. It's always good to play next to him because you can trust him. You know what he can do for you, and you know what he can bring into the game. For a defender, trust is everything. With Van Dijk, that trust is absolute. Liverpool admiration beyond Van Dijk. While Van de Ven stopped short of naming multiple Liverpool players explicitly in the same breath, his comments reflect a deep respect for the standards set at Anfield. Van Dijk embodies those standards: leadership, calmness, positional intelligence, and authority. It's no coincidence that Slot's admiration for Van de Ven mirrors Liverpool's long-standing appreciation for defenders who combine athleticism with composure. In another universe, Van de Ven could easily have been wearing red. The toughest test, Alexander Isak. Despite facing elite forwards week after week, Van de Ven has singled out one opponent above all others: Alexander Isak. So the game we played against Newcastle when we lost, that game I slipped as well, Van de Ven admitted. But this game, Isak was a different level. The respect is unmistakable. I knew he was top class, but in that game I was like, he's a top class player. Isak, long admired by Liverpool fans and frequently linked with Anfield, showcased everything a modern striker needs. He can run in behind, he can come into the ball. Technically, he's really good. He's fast, he has a top finish. Van de Ven paused, then delivered the ultimate compliment. At that point, he was literally just everywhere. The Liverpool connection that keeps returning. The irony is impossible to ignore. Van de Ven rejected Arne Slot. He praises Virgil van Dijk. He struggles most against Alexander Isak, a striker Liverpool have long admired. Football careers are rarely linear. They are shaped by timing, opportunity, and the courage to make decisions without knowing where they will lead.